Hello. Welcome to the Working Mother Experience podcast. I'm the creator and sometimes host, Morgan Craig-Broadwith, thankfully supported by an incredible team. A team that's going to help you meet the artists, explore their art, and unpack what it means to work and mother. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoy. Today on the podcast, we connect with Amelia Larson, clinical psychologist, working mother, former foster parent, and of course, artist. Amelia shares with us how she created her art using a practice she often uses with her clients, letting the paintbrush go where it needs to go and seeing what comes from it. We hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. Amelia, welcome to the Working Mother Experience podcast. So excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So Amelia, tell us a little bit about how you came to be connected with us and how you created your piece of art.
Okay. So I was on LinkedIn one day and one of my friends reposted that there was an event coming up, and the event happened to be really close to my house. And for some random crazy reason, it just worked with my schedule, which never happens. So I took that as a sign from the universe just to go for it. Also, the speaker at the event was really using a surfing analogy to talk about motherhood and talking about, the waves crashing down, and it feels like you just can't get a breath and can't get a break. However, if you just hold your breath and duck dive under a wave, there's this really serene moment of calm. And I was really interested in that analogy because I felt very connected to it, both from a personal and a professional level around sometimes you just feel like you can't get a breath and can't get your head above water. And how do we as working mothers figure out when we can just take a quick breath and just take a minute and duck dive under the water? So that analogy really spoke to me. And then I just came to the event, and I was really inspired by the whole concept of the working mother experience, recognizing that as women in our society, we wear so many different hats. And sometimes it's really challenging to figure out which hat I need to wear when and why, and how quickly can I switch those hats and find the one that I'm looking for or I need in the moment. And it can be really challenging. So that's sort of how I found out about the working mother experience. It was sort of the universe put it in my way and I went with it. And then I came to the event and just was really open to the experience.
And so I realized as I asked that question that I didn't even give you a chance to introduce yourself. So Amelia, tell us, and that's wonderful. That's such a great journey. It's amazing when the universe gives us a bit of a signal or a nudge or a giant push, whatever it may be. But Amelia, I apologize. Would you mind sharing a little bit about who you are and if you're a mother, and what you do in your working day and what you do outside of your working day and all those hats? Tell us a little bit more about those hats.
Absolutely. So I am a clinical social worker by trade. I get to support a really large nonprofit in Calgary, being the clinical director. So I have a team of therapists, amazing humans that I get to support, who go out in the community and do incredible work with all kinds of people, and help them heal. And in the evenings, I have a private practice so that I can remain connected to the work. And I'm a mother. So I have a 6-year-old. I'm a partner. I'm a former foster parent. When I'm not doing one of those things, we love being outside. And I find that being outside is really how I duck dive under the wave and can just reset and get back to a bit of a baseline so that I can come back to life and sort out which hat I need to wear, when, and why.
So you work full time as a clinical director, and then you put on a hat as an entrepreneur, business owner, therapist, and you stay connected. And tell us a little bit, like, how does that schedule work? How many hours? What does that look like? Like, that seems quite big.
Big. And you know what? I am so fortunate that I really love the work and I
Mhm.
get to do something I really enjoy every day. Every day is really different for me, and that's super important for me. If I had any sort of job where I knew what to expect when I walked in the door, I don't know that I would be engaged or enjoy it or be able to do it in this
Mhm.
way. Um, so you're right, it is a lot of hours, but I truly feel that I get to use my skill set. I love interacting and connecting with people. And during my day job, I get to do that, but not to the same degree that I used to.
Right. Yeah, that's always the rub, isn't it? As you progress, if you decide to take a leadership track, that you lose connection to sort of the work that you started doing, the work that you love, the work that brought you into it. And you may also love being a leader and running a team and supporting a team to grow and evolve. And you do get exposure to sort of,
Mhm.
again, what you came in doing. So Amelia, what struck me at the event when we were chatting is your piece and the link, the approach you took with your piece, and the link back to yourself as a therapist and how you get people to connect and share. So if you don't mind, talk to us a little bit about your art. We're going to have it up on the website once we go live with this podcast. So give listeners a little bit to what to look for. What does your piece look like? And then, the approach you took, the methodology that you used to create it.
Sure. So, admittedly, I did almost no research coming into the event. And I said that to you, Morgan. I was there right on time, and I think I
You
was the first
were.
one there, and I had no idea what the layout was or anything. I just signed up and came. And then as the event progressed and I realized, oh, we're doing art. Oh, okay. I'm not an artist. This is a little bit out of my comfort zone. Um, a slight moment of like panic around like, where's the exit? How can I get out of here real quick? But then, you know, stepping back into, no, I'm here for a reason. This is an experience. Also making the connection between this is not about my artistic ability or lack thereof at all. It's about the process and about the
Mhm.
experience. And sometimes in my practice, what I do with certain clients is open the session with just sort of a grounding and regulating activity that is like doodle art, I guess we call it. So literally you have your paper in front of you, you put your pen or pencil down, you take a really deep breath, and then you just like sigh out the breath and move the pen or pencil around the paper however it feels good for you.
Mm.
And once you do that, you put your pen down and you sort of look at the page, turn it around a few times and just notice. Um, you see if there's anything that stands out to you. Do you notice any figures or structures or anything that looks recognizable in the lines? So that's really where I came from this because again, I'm not an artist and I didn't really have any ideas. And after I it was a paintbrush, put the paintbrush down and moved the piece around, I noticed there was almost um, what looked to me to be a face, a large face, and then a smaller face underneath, and then a bunch of black lines that sort of looked like they were all separate entities. And in that, I noticed, okay, so this is like a mother, a child, and the line being life and what life looks like, and that there are many elements and pieces of life, and they can all look really disparate and separate
Mhm.
and um, act almost sort of like they're compartmentalized and they have no connection to each other. And when we zoom out and look at it again, it's no, the line is actually one line and they are all connected. And that really spoke to me because so many elements of being a working mother, I feel like many of us have to compartmentalize our days, all the tasks, all the things we have to do from like, you know, waking up, getting the kids up, feeding breakfast, making lunches, getting dressed, brushing teeth, all the really tasky elements. Um, and it's really challenging because in order to get through some of those day-to-day tasky things, we have to keep them very separate from each other, because that helps us keep us sane. That helps us to, check the things off the list. And in that, really recognizing that can be really helpful. I think it's a strategy. I think there's also a bit of danger in it.
Why danger? And I'm writing these notes down so I know, because you're saying really great things. And so why is it a danger to compartmentalize?
It's a danger because as women in our society, when we compartmentalize, we're only looking at pieces and we're not recognizing the impact that has on the whole. And when we only look at pieces, I think we're super zoomed in. We're not checking in with ourselves, checking in with our own needs, checking in with the big picture of what's actually going on. And if you think about your day, Morgan, and all the pieces of your day, and you get to the end of the day and you're like, I'm exhausted. But when we're going through that, we can't think about it. We just think about getting the piece done so we can move on to the next piece. And we don't often give ourselves opportunity to zoom out and look at the big picture of what's actually going on for me right now. What do I actually need? How am I actually feeling? And that leads to things like burnout, fatigue, compassion fatigue, stress. I think it can be really an opportunity for, our inner critic, the worst things we think about ourselves, to come out, illness to come in, and just, not getting to show up as the best versions of ourselves.
So when we're too zoomed in, what you're saying, or what I'm hearing, so when we're too zoomed in on the task and the orientation to the task completion, I totally resonate with this. That's where you are saying we're going to hear more of that inner critic. Okay. Say more on that. Why on the task zoom in are we getting more of the inner critic?
Totally. I think I'm going to bring in another concept here. It's called the window of tolerance. So if you can imagine sort of like one of those old-fashioned windows that it slides up and down. Okay. Just imagine that in your head. When we're feeling good about ourselves and when we're meeting our needs, our physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, if that makes sense for you, belonging needs, that window's really nice and open. So if you can imagine a breeze can come in and come out, and there's just like a really free flow of things coming in and out. As we start to deplete our resources, maybe we're not sleeping as much, maybe we're not eating properly, we're not exercising, we're not connecting with other people or spirituality, the window slowly closes. So less is able to flow in and less is able to flow out. So our tolerance to manage stress becomes minimized.
Wow.
And yeah.
No, keep going. Sorry. I'm writing that. Do you know what? I've never, ever heard of the analogy of the window of tolerance. It's pretty powerful.
Super powerful. And when we check in on it and use that analogy around how open is my window right now? If shit hits the fan in this moment, am I going to be able to manage it in a way that feels good and aligned with my values and who I am and who I want to be? And again, when our resources are depleted, the answer is no, you're not. So what do you need day to day, minute to minute? I know that's unreasonable, but what do you need throughout the day to just make sure you're holding the window open as much as it can? And when we're just so zoomed in on school drop off, getting to work, getting to the office, answering my emails, going to this meeting, completing this project, talking to this person, we're not giving ourselves a lot of opportunity to zoom out and say, okay, what have I actually done today? Where is my energy and resource level at? And what do I need to be able to keep my window open and show up as the best version of myself?
Yeah, I like this analogy so much more than the oxygen mask. Somehow
Mm,
I can't articulate the why. I roll my eyes at that one. Okay. I don't know why also because it's in a good one. Like I get it. But to be really honest, if you're a parent going down on a plane, I understand the rationale, but I'm going to throw that oxygen mask on my kids first. So I think that's sometimes what I struggle with because like, yeah, I would literally lay down and die for my children. And so, I appreciate they're saying you'll die first and then your kid will die if you don't do this. So don't be a dingbat. But I think somehow I like this analogy more, and I'm going to spend some time thinking on the why because my brain is given the task switching volume that occurred between 6:47 and 8:34 today. I have to say, my brain doesn't have a ton of capability to really explore it deeply, and so yeah, it was a late start. I usually wake up early, but you know my window, if we're going to use that analogy, and I think it's going to resonate with so many of our listeners, my window is a bit tighter today and a bit more closed because my baby is teething. She is
mm,
sick. She was up for 2 hours in the middle of the night last night. And this is always a weak point for me is night wakings. And so we've moved through a lot of that, right? She's almost 15 months. So we've moved through a lot of those night wakings, but they come back and then you always go, oh my gosh, I existed like this for so long. So anyways, I think it's a beautiful, wonderful analogy for anyone who's listening to play with and think about, and it just offers a different lens potentially than the oxygen mask because of that breeze and giving you that visual of that free flow.
yeah.
And I think we can all connect with when our window has been not even open. It's like this little whistle that's coming through from the winter's breeze coming in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I encourage everyone to play with that. And I also encourage, I actually think there's a beautiful, invitation to our listeners around how you did your art, Amelia. And I think it actually makes this initiative even more, or not even more accessible, because that
Mhm.
is one thing where, as you said, I was looking for the door when I came to the work. Oh my gosh, we're doing art. I didn't appreciate we're doing art. My goodness. I just thought we were going to come. I'm going to listen to some nice speakers and I'm going to see some art and I'm going to leave. And so I think that's often the response that people feel internally. Whether they articulate it to me depends on the depth of our relationship, where they say, hard pass, not doing it. Well, get me the door from this conversation. I love you, but I don't want to do this. And so, the approach you've taken and the approach you use, it's both therapeutic and it's also makes art more accessible. So there's an invitation to our listeners.
Totally. It took the pressure off me.
Yes.
This is gonna be abstract, and that's okay. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to paint a beautiful landscape or some sort of
No,
portrait or something that, wasn't going to happen, frankly.
no.
Uh, and it was enjoyable.
And
And
that's so there you go. You're tapping into a few themes, is that this isn't meant to be anxiety inducing. I do think the lead up often can be, and that's okay. I want to normalize that. Is there's all these labels and this self-talk going on, internal dialogue around I'm not artistic, I'm not creative, ugh, I don't want to do this, I don't have time, my window is a crack. But so this is part of, I think, for me, when I do sit down and tap into that creative, it actually does open the window a little bit more for me. And so, play with that and take some of that pressure off. And that's what I loved so much. Your piece was striking to me because it was so different than anything I've seen submitted so far to our gallery. I'm so grateful you came on the podcast and shared a little bit about your journey getting there. But so even with that, with the not knowing of where it was going, not a literal interpretation, and it removed sometimes, I think, when folks do try to do a more literal translation of what's in their head to the canvas or the piece of paper, there is a sense of loss or disappointment because the translation isn't exactly what you had in your mind. And I went through that with a few of mine. And so this kind of removes it because you actually don't have any preconceived notion of what this should be.
yes, my expectations were very low.
Yeah.
And even the act of sitting down and doing one thing that really took all of my attention. I wasn't on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting at a group um, of women who were just chatting, and it was very casual. It was super mindful. And taking those minutes out of the day to do something where our entire attention is just focused on one thing opens our window regardless of what it is. Because in this society, we are thrown so many curveballs every minute. Our phone's buzzing, the email's going off, we're hearing someone chat across the room, our kids screaming. And the ability to focus our entire attention on one thing is very, very rare. And we have to carve out time for it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And what happens in the brain when we take those moments is we're strengthening those trails in our brain that help calm our parasympathetic nervous system, help reduce anxiety, stress, depression, and just give it a moment to breathe and literally open the window a little bit more so more air and oxygen can flow in.
From what you said, do you see when you're, and I appreciate, let's talk high level, right? We're not going to go into specifics from a confidentiality standpoint, but do you see in terms of your patients that are coming, and do you work predominantly with children, adults, or all? And just give us a little bit on that. But what are you seeing? What are the themes and trends that you're seeing coming at a macro level and coming in at the micro experience with your clients, around this inattention or this distractedness or this dopamine, constant need for dopamine hits through our pings and zings and whatever? Would love to just get a little sense of those themes. What are you hearing, seeing?
So at our agency, we support people ages 4 to the end of life. So we see people
Huge.
across the entire lifespan. Obviously, post-pandemic, things have looked really, really different. We're seeing skyrockets and anxiety, challenges with social emotional learning, which is essentially how do we interact with other people and how do we be in relationship with other people. I think, every other child these days is being queried for an ADHD diagnosis.
It's too much.
It's too much. And I don't think it's organic, which means I don't think it's actually a brain structure problem. I think it's that we've created an environment where kids aren't being set up for success or being set up to have prolonged focus because they're always on to the next thing. We think about games and even, streaming services. There's no commercials, there's no waiting. You are getting what we call automatic gratification. Back in our day, when there was a show on, we would have to break every 5 minutes for a commercial break, which wasn't great, but at least we were, delaying our gratification and having to practice patience and having to practice waiting. And I think this isn't just children. This is a lot of people. A lot of people post-pandemic really struggle to be out in social realms. Even myself noticing when I walked into the working mother experience and I was like, oh, okay, I'm noticing something here. I didn't do any research. I'm the first person here. My friend who I thought was coming couldn't because her kid was sick. So I'm here by myself. Pre-pandemic, none of those things would have bothered me. I think it, just not having the
security blanket.
Totally. 3 years off from all of that really reduced my tolerance of situations where maybe I don't feel super comfortable. And yeah.
There's so many amazing, what would you say for parents as a kind of invitation to them to help their children and themselves? We've talked about the arts, like that is a great way to expand that focus muscle, that mindfulness. Is there anything else that's something that they could explore and play with around expanding focus?
It's so simple, and I'm sure everyone's heard it. It's just put your phone away. When you don't have to have your phone, we need to make a conscious effort of leaving the phone on the counter or wherever so that we're not automatically grabbing it every 4 seconds or feeling the vibration or hearing the ping of a message coming in and checking it right away. We need to model that to our kids. We need to give them our undivided attention, and we need to practice having undivided attention. And it is really, really hard. I struggle with this so much. And, how can we keep ourselves accountable? What I do is between 6 and 6:30 every evening, I put both my work phone and my personal phone on the counter. I have an alarm set on my phone to know that it's time to do that so that I can really be present with my family, because otherwise it's never going to happen.
Mm. I think it's yes, we've heard it, and it's just the addiction is a strong one, and I think it's just, again, recognizing that it is an addiction. It is chemically driven. It is very difficult, and that gives us a bit of grace, a bit more gentleness in our approach to sort of saying like, why can't I do this? You're literally wiring your brain, as you said, and so when you play with the other side of that, you're helping to rewire, change those caverns in your mind, and sort of not make them the Grand Canyon, but maybe a bit less deep, a bit less well trodden, and rewiring that. So that's a really, like, look, what you've done to me is very manageable. It's half an hour, right? And some people put them in a box, some people put them in a bed. And then it's what could you do maybe that is something that where you do enjoy, and you do lose, you sort of can lose track of time because you're so fully immersed in it. Is it reading? Is it playing with your children? Is it being in nature? For me, it's being in nature, and I often do leave my cell phone if I'm not listening to something. I think that's the other thing. Like we don't constantly need to be stimulated. Like you're overstimulated. Our nervous systems are totally overstimulated. So actually, if you go for a walk, leave your phone at home. Don't worry about the conversation you were going to have or the podcast you wanted to listen to. Just listen to nature. Let that, again, that's building that attention muscle, that ability to focus, to be present. So I think those are really practical tools. And again, it's something we can all do, and we can set example for our children too. Right. So I think that's.
It's a build up. Half an hour is something I had to build up too. I started at 5 minutes.
Okay.
Some people might need to start at 1 or 2, and that's okay. We're talking about like a sustainable approach. Having somebody who has their phone and is checking their phone twice every minute, put their phone away for half an hour, is going to be really challenging, and they might not be successful. We want to build sustainable routine over time. Baby steps.
Baby steps. That's a good, my heart hurts a little bit, to be honest, just at the state we're in, I guess. I think I'm just having a moment of realization of just how challenging this technological world and wonderful advancements, and how, again, everything has a good and a bad, right? So I'm just having a moment of, oh man, that's really depressing. The thought of it is it's a little depressing to like, oh, you can't even do a minute. But I'm not trying to put shame or judgment. I think it's really good the way you framed it. It's just, and I'm for my own self. It's not me casting judgment on anyone. It's my own self, my own issues. For my work. And it's interesting because I've recently changed industries and not careers, but companies, because I really wanted flexibility. So there was more of that ability to work from home, which is a double-edged sword, because now work is always with you. There isn't that division of church and state that really did go away with COVID. That's wonderful. It allows you to maybe better manage working and having a young family, or just however, even if you don't have a young family. But I will say this, I'm picking up and leaving early to go do that, but there's still that need to be working. And so when I'm with my children, perhaps the distraction is even greater because I haven't physically severed and left a building. It's my home. I can come back and sit back down at the computer. So really that hygiene around how you do it, it's massive discipline. Okay, we could go on this thread for a long time. You're a foster parent, okay? Were you a foster parent when you had your own biological child? Tell us a little bit about that journey, and then I'll ask my closing question.
Totally. So we officially became foster parents shortly before we found out we were pregnant. It was unexpected, so it sort of unrolled at the same time, which was a journey in itself, because we did not anticipate both these things happening in tandem. And they did, and it was an interesting moment in our life. My partner had decided to go back to school. There was a lot of change and a lot to navigate. And when I look back on that period of time, that is when the art piece really, I think, I can see myself in those pieces because I was just really trying to survive. I was trying to do all the things and make the lunches and, be the emotional holder of everything at home while my partner was in school, while I was pregnant, while we were welcoming this new human into our family.
Mm-hmm.
So recognizing that in times of change or transition, I think many women go to the place where it's so compartmentalized because we are just treading water. We are just trying not to get pounded by the waves. And those times when we're feeling overwhelmed or stressed or on autopilot, as many of us are the times where we most need to check in and most need to duck dive under the wave, take a breath, find those mindful moments, and be really intentional about implementing those throughout the day.
Yeah, and with a duck dive, using that analogy, these can be short, right? These can
Totally.
be okay.
Yeah. Kate, who came up with this analogy, really said it's like, I think she even used the example of, can I count backwards from 10 right now just to like take a minute? It can be a minute, it could be less, it could be just really recognizing I need to take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing just in terms of that early experience. That would be a lot navigating as a foster parent and a expecting mom and a supportive partner. And I do think there is something to pay attention to. There's many things. It is the inherent, I'm not trying to gender stereotype, men are giving too, so just we'll leave that one. But there is an inherent giving, helping nature that exists within women. And I do think there's some biological evolutionary components with that. And I see it in my daughter versus my son. It's not to say he isn't giving and isn't loving and he isn't sweet. He's all those wonderful things. But there is a difference in that. And so I think there's an outflow. If I could use that a window analogy again, there's often a lot of breeze going out. How much is coming back in? And so there is a lot of outflow, and in that outflow, to what you said, there's a compartmentalization as a protection mechanism. Because if we paid attention to all of the outflow, we would go, oh my gosh, like how am I even still existing? So it's that zoom out, as you said, which is another great. So we're constantly zoomed in. So how often are we zooming out in our day to day? Is there anything else, Amelia, that we haven't touched on that you think is really important for working mothers, working parents to explore, think about?
I just want to add to your point around the gender piece, because
Yes.
as women or women identifying people, we are socialized. And we have been socialized for centuries to be a certain way. If I look at my industry, social work, it's a helping profession.
Mm-hmm.
I can count the number of males who are on our staff of almost 500, which is kind of appalling, and this is carried on throughout all systems in our society. Even if we think of like the typical 1950s, 1960s, Leave It to Beaver mother, or ads that were targeted at women. It was like, look at this washing machine. It'll make your life so much easier. And the dream was to have a washing machine. We really need to acknowledge that society has socialized women and female identifying people to behave a certain way. And as mothers, how are we modeling the outpouring of the window? How are we modeling that to our young females, daughters, female identifying people? And how are we intentionally bringing things into the window? And we need to give ourselves permission to be intentional about not just giving, but receiving. And sometimes we have to carve out space for that. And it sometimes takes a lot of planning, and we have to get babysitters and we have to coordinate and leave a meal and all these things. And we can get really caught up in the logistics of doing those things,
Mm-hmm.
so much so that we don't do it. At the end of the day, it's like, oh, forget it. This is just easier to not.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to cost benefit. What's the cost to me if I don't do this? What's the cost if I don't go out and see my friend because I haven't connected with someone personally in weeks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I, I, I agree with you. I think there is a nature component, like there is a natural biological driver that creates some of that. And then I think there is then, of course, as you've outlined, a expectation that may exist there. And so I think it's, to me, at least, there is a blend of both. It is, as always, as anything is, blessing and curse, right? And that this is a wonderful, beautiful attribute of being a woman. And it's still a wonderful thing that we've got. We carry this wonderful strength and beauty. And so it's not to say that this is what makes, it's wonderful to have these differences. I'm proud that this is a part. It's that, as you say, like it's, when is the expectation taking it too far, or we are feeling the pressure of the expectation, or we've taken on too much of that. And it's at the expense and at a great loss to us, right? Because then that outflow becomes very just trapped, right? It becomes trapped. We resent, and then resentment is a very vicious feeling, emotion, etc. So
Totally.
yeah.
And thinking, if I can just tie it together, Morgan, thinking about the spectrum, you said, I don't like the oxygen mask because it's all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
You're put the oxygen mask on and you live, or you don't and you die. And the window is really recognizing that it ebbs and flows. And depending on the day, the week, the season we're in, things can look really different, and that's okay. And we have to be able to live in the duality. Things can be both, and we can, love our roles and get so much reward from our roles. And it can be hard, and they can exist in the same space. That's
really important. That's a good that's a really great message, is that it can be both and all at once. And I think you explained it. I didn't articulate that about the oxygen mask and the window. You did. So thank you. That's why it's that all or nothing. And then this has a softer approach. This makes more sense to me in terms of how, and that sometimes we just need a little 10-second countdown to kind of expand the window, or we need an hour away, or we need actually to take a bit longer. We need more. So I think, yeah, you've articulated it. I did not. Amelia, is there anything else before we close off from our conversation today that you want to share around, guidance, support, being a working mother, anything else that you haven't shared?
I just think, and I know because I've experienced it, it's really hard. And we need to make sure that we're checking in with all aspects of who we are, and feeding that and living in alignment with our values and keeping ourselves well, whether that means eating well, exercising, mental wellness, going to talk to someone if you feel overwhelmed, connecting with people, and the importance of giving yourself permission to do that. Because if we don't, it might not come from anywhere else.
I would have to agree with you there. People, and the other thing I might say on this, hopefully it's not too self-serving, but it might be, is if someone in your life that you trust and that you love and care, and that they have your best interest at heart, and they're sort of saying, hello, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your best friend, maybe it's your mother. If they're saying, hello, I'm noticing like this may be an opportunity, please listen. And I say this because I very rarely listen. So I'm like, screw you. I'm tougher. I will push on. I got this. How dare you even suggest that I don't have this figured out? And so it's totally defensive. It's very prideful. It comes obviously from a place of insecurity, if I'm being really honest. And it's because you want to have that perception that you absolutely have it all going and figured out. But, I would say if someone outside of yourself is, because we can get lots of signals that we completely ignore. And so, but if there's someone in your circle that you really do, that it's from a good place, please listen. Please your window is closing and you need to open it up a little bit. And someone's telling you they're tapping on that glass.
And the people around us are the best to reflect back what they're seeing, because we often ignore it for
We do.
ourselves.
And I do think our kids energetically pick up on these things. So if they're behaviorally showing up in a way that's really frustrating you, there's an opportunity to reflect and pause and say, okay, how am I contributing to this? And we call it, we've coined November, the November fall aparts, because it's like sickness. It's like the stress of school. We're almost at holidays. Everyone's annoyed with each other.
So true.
So if you're in the November fall aparts, what are you doing to maybe regroup a little bit for yourself, so that energy, and it's not to say it's all on you, it's like all your fault that everything's falling apart. That's not what I mean. But we're a part of that symbiotic relationship in our family, and our kids are so much more sensitive than we often think they are. So
100%. And you are responsible for your own health and happiness at the end of the day, along with a lot of other people's.
Really good point. I think that's, and taking some accountability on that, right? Because then we get into martyrdom, and that's not a good place to be either. That's enough. Anyways, we could go a whole topic on martyrdom, but okay, Amelia, honestly, thank you so much for being here on the podcast today. It was an absolute pleasure. You've got so many wonderful things to share with our listeners. Just thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Working Mother Experience Podcast. That's a wrap, folks.